Check 1, 2.
Go! Curious about real estate? Yes! Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need. Get over the fear and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello, everybody. Michael Quarles with the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Today, I have with me Heather Wagenhals, and she's fascinating. I mean, she's a little bit of everything, I think. We're going to talk about identity theft. We're going to talk about saving money. We're going to talk about passive income through real estate. All kinds of things. We're going to be all over the board. I apologize, but there's so much to get to and ask her about that I'm going to ask her a bunch of silly questions. So here we go. Heather, tell us about yourself.
Well, it's great to be here, Michael, and to know a little bit about me. If you want to know my background and what brought me to where I am with my current radio show and my investment strategies, is that I grew up here in Arizona, and we were so poor, we had to envy the dirt poor kids because at least they had dirt.
So that's poor.
Yeah. Yeah, and I knew that that's not where I wanted to be.
Yeah, why is it, do you think, and this is way off tangent, why is it, do you think, people stay poor?
Because it has to do with their upbringing. It has to do with whether or not their parents had instilled hope and dreams and aspirations and the confidence to challenge themselves to get out of where they are, or if their parents kind of just lived the same shackled mentality that most people that have, systemic or multi-generational impoverished mentalities kind of just, they feel hopeless. And so it depends on what's been passed down to the kid, and with that information, and that's what makes what I do now so great, because we already know to spend less and save more when it comes to money management, but we don't because we're biologically set up to fail at that. And anything that we have, we can go and look at it a few different ways. And we're either going to accept the information in front of us and make a decision, or we're going to reject that information and work with another premise. And that's our biggest strength as human beings and individuals. But we usually don't run toward the carrot, but we will run away from the fire burning at our fannies.
So if we just use the same energy to run towards success, we'd get there too.
Right, but the way the brain is set up, and this is what's kind of awesome about what I do with the Unlock Your Wealth Foundation, is that the brain, and depending upon conditioning as a child, but the brain interprets the lack of pain as a pleasurable experience. So as long as you're away from a painful or threatening situation, you don't necessarily need to chase additional pleasures. And that's where I say we're biologically set up to fail at long-term anything management, whether it comes to money management, weight management, career management. It's all the same thing. It's about something that happens in the future. And even though we have the smarts to invent computers that think faster than we do, we still operate through that same brain evolution that initially had to elude saber-toothed tigers.
Well, so I'm going to analyze myself. If I don't have a need to do better because not being in pain wouldn't give me that need, correct? So if I'm doing okay, no pain is associated to doing okay, what makes me want to do better?
Because it's your instinctive drive, and it's going to be based on the conditioning you're around. Have you been around people that were always, firefighting, as I call it? They go from one catastrophe to the next, and they just keep stopping the bleeding. Or were you around and surrounded by people that were constantly chasing the next best good thing? So it all depends on what you've been exposed to, but the majority of people move away from pain versus towards pleasure. You'll hear people, and one of the most sabotaging things somebody can say is, I don't need to be rich, I just want to be comfortable. And comfortable to the brain is not in pain. So when people, say, I don't want to be rich, I just don't want to be poor, because they're focusing on the poverty and avoiding that. That's what they're looking at. And usually it's over your shoulder because, poverty comes from the past because you have all the power in the present to change where you're going for your future. And instead of looking ahead at being rich, and even if you don't get rich, if you're looking forward toward being rich, you're going to be way further ahead of the poverty line that you left behind because you're not busy focusing on it.
Absolutely.
But people don't realize that.
Absolutely. I just, my life, when I was raised poor as well, and didn't realize we were poor. That was kind of the weird part about it, because I think when you're surviving in poverty, you may not know that you're in poverty. And so, especially way back then, in caveman years, because I'm so darn young. But, I worked my way out of it somehow. And I absolutely believe it's being a goal setter. I wake up every day going, how can I better my life today over yesterday? And how can I make tomorrow better than today? And one of those things is to get richer. Now, I don't equate necessarily money to wealth. It's part of wealth, but I always want to become more wealthy with the 6 aspects of my life that I try really hard at to create wealth in. So how did you arrive from poverty to here?
Well, it was a tough road, let me just tell you. So my first business, I had a lawn mowing, babysitting, and housekeeping service here in Arizona. At 11, I was an entrepreneur. And so I had a little ad in the community newsletter. And let me just tell you, it was tough mowing lawns in the summer in Arizona when you only had a push mower because my mother never trusted me with gasoline, so I wasn't allowed to invest and upgrade my equipment. But I was working for all of these people that had these amazing houses, and they had cool toys, and they had everything that I didn't. And I never knew, like you, that I was poor until I saw what others had. Yeah. And how simpler their lives were, and how instead of focusing on every day, where am I going to eat, they were focusing on what do I get to do next? What fun am I going to have?
Right.
And I thought, that's where I want to be. And so I kind of made it to where I am now. I bought my first property, my first piece of real estate at 22 because I knew renting was a waste of money. And so I didn't want to get caught up in that early on. I grew up in the 70s and 80s were my teenage years, and so Gordon Gekko told me greed was good, and so I went and I became a stockbroker because I was like, well, that's where all the money is. But I thought it was going to be, power lunches, $1 million deals, and I was a glorified telemarketer. I'm like, well, this sucks. This isn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. You were a glorified telemarketer.
Yeah, and so, I was just making rich people richer, but there was no, sense of purpose with that. Because, so now I'm making all the money I want, but I'm still not rich because I'm spending it, and then I married a man who helped me spend it faster than I made it.
Isn't that the shame of achieving another zero? That it seems like the other side has a zero too.
Or 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's like, man, I just made, more money, but along with that came more debt or more exposure or more stress. And
right. And debt is good. I have the wrong kind of debt because I thought that, because I was until I learned about how rich people really were, I made assumptions about what they did because I didn't know. I only had the tools that I had growing up. And my mother's money management savvy was if you have a coupon or it's on sale, you're morally obligated to buy that item. Whether or not in the world you need it, whether or not in the world you have 20 back at home still in the wrapper, you're obligated to buy that because it's on sale. And I grew up with a hoarder and I didn't even realize it until, I got out and then I would go back and I just would see all this stuff everywhere. And I was like, holy smokes. And I was just blown away by that. And but that's what I grew up with. So, I was out with my credit cards because, you always see people, paying with plastic. So you think, oh, well, okay, if I can afford the minimum payment on this credit card, I'm cool, right?
Right.
Not knowing that the rich people were really paying it off every month.
Right.
And so I became financing my way into this big black hole. And that was back in the day before they changed the laws. And your minimum payment didn't necessarily cover the amount of interest that accumulated that month. So you would you'd be paying interest on interest, and then you'd be paying interest on over limit fees on interest. And it just escalated out of control.
And so many people don't realize how to pay off debt correctly. Mm-hmm. I'm amazed when I chat with them, and people can get out of debt if they just choose to and made the correct choices as they become debt free. And I battled that with my wife, but we got her, because she was, the mom with 3 jobs to promote or support 2 men, one in college and one in high school. And so, credit cards helped her do that, and student loans helped her do that. But the interest rate on those things are so large that she could never see her way out of, from underneath it. And we took one at a time, and I taught her the idea of, paying off debt. And now she's absolutely debt free. The only thing she hoards is jewelry. That's my fault though, because I love buying her jewelry. So.
Well, there you go. See, and you know what? I remember I went looking, I was at this charitable event, and they had all this amazing jewelry, and I tried on this emerald. And I was like, wow, this is gorgeous. And I'm thinking it's a colored stone, right? Because I don't know anything at this point. I didn't know that, I just thought diamonds were the best. But this emerald was like $500,000. And I was like, oh my God, it costs $500,000. And the guy says, no, you're just transferring your asset from cash into stones. And I oh, that's a great sales technique. I'm not really spending money. I'm just transferring the value to another asset, and so I think that the jewelry's okay.
Yeah, no, she loves it. I had to convert my gun safe into a jewelry box, but it's all right. I'm okay. I'm still a man, though. I just want everybody to know I still have a small portion of my gun safe that is mine. And
there you go.
Anyway, way off on a tangent. I apologize. So first rental at 22. Did you live in it at one side of it and rent out the other, or what was that about?
No, I just, I wasn't smart at all with my first property, so I bought this, and it was back in the day when you could do cash to mortgage and do assumptions on FHA. Uh-huh. And so that's how I got into my first property. And it was before any of the run-up. So this was in the 90s, so it was a really great investment. And, there was a twofold purpose. I wanted to get away from my mother as far as I could without leaving the city, and I wanted to buy it in a neighborhood that would be cool, that was evolving. And so I was able to accomplish both of those things and still have, I didn't want a ridiculous house payment, but my problem wasn't the first property that I bought. Although, I bought it right, I negotiated it right, but my problem was that it was a single-family unit. It wasn't a multifamily property, which I wish it would have been. But the problem was that I had all of this debt that I couldn't get around in order to get into my next investment property, because I knew that I wanted to be with cash flows in a cash flow scenario, but I couldn't because I had to get rid of my debt first.
Right.
And that was my biggest challenge because, I'm flying by the seat of my pants, and, I had a husband that didn't make a fraction of the money that I did, but he was okay with spending at my income level too. So we had both of us spending at my income level, and that was the biggest challenge. And getting out of the mindset of stuff, because I grew up with a hoarder, and realizing that, if I'm financing Ferragamos, okay, and that's the end of the road for those shoes. And they're not going to do anything for me. They're going to make me look good. But the minute I wear them, even if I took and sold them at a consignment store, I wouldn't even have what the value would be for those. Right. And so I said, okay, how do I fix this? And the way to fix this is that I needed to leverage myself into wealth instead of continually leveraging myself into debt. And so I said, how do I structure my finances in a way that I can acquire more property and start having other people build my wealth? Because ideally that's what happens when you get into rental properties. When you start investing, somebody else is paying that mortgage, and they're paying you for the privilege to live there. So you've got somebody building equity each and every day, regardless of what the market is doing, whether it's up or down, with appreciation, you've still got somebody paying off a debt that you assumed. And so if you structure your finances right and you manage your credit effectively, you can leverage yourself into being a millionaire in a relatively short period of time.
How short?
Well, if you do it with the real estate workshops that I used to teach, and I'm being prodded back into starting to facilitate them again, you can become a millionaire in as little as 5 years. And you never have to do anything outside of what you're already doing. You keep your same job. You're not hunting for property. You're not fixing up stuff. All you do is you use my program that systematically moves you through the accumulation process using government financing. And what you do is, you take possession of the property. And when you do that, you get the quality financing instead of having to have, non-owner occupant interest rates, which are usually 2 points above the regular market. You don't have that. Plus, you get your capital gains exemption when you go to sell the property. If you stretch it out for a couple of years, you can play Uncle Sam's game and help, minimize the tax liability that you have as well. So it's a neat strategy.
Yeah, making $1 million in 5 years isn't a bad thing. I think I instantly remember the news story I heard on the news, since it was a news story, where there was a company that in 4 years became worth $1 billion. So if you can make $1 billion in 4 years, you can absolutely make $1 million in 5 years. And I only say that not to diminish the idea of making $1 million, but $1 million isn't a lot of money in today's market.
No.
So it's highly achievable. I mean, when we're looking at multi-million-dollar markets, we're looking at multi-million-dollar markets now. So $1 million is absolutely achievable for everybody listening. And whether you're homeless, never have bought a piece of real estate, young, middle-aged, older, all you have to have is desire and then the knowledge to achieve.
Thanks for listening. We'll be right back. Are you running out of leads? It's time you tried Yellow Letters at yellowletters.com. Get motivated seller leads through yellow letters, postcards, zip letters, typed professional letters, greeting cards, door hangers, and business cards. Yellow Letters is a full-service marketing company created with your success in mind. Get the personal attention you need to get your direct mail campaign started and get in touch at yellowletters.com.
And we are back in 3, 2, 1.
Now, I'm reading that you're a Certified Independent Theft Risk Management Specialist. That seems like a big old title.
Yeah, identity theft risk management specialist. Yes. Yes, I am. And that came about from trial and error, actually. Throughout my life, I've had challenges with people assuming my identity. My current husband was just a victim of tax fraud about 6 years ago. And it's very, very devastating. And if you're trying to create a financial future for yourself, it's very, very difficult when you're busy chasing your tail because somebody just took all of that hard work that you built and vaporized it in a moment by going out and living large or becoming new and creating all kind of problems. So the Institute for Consumer Financial Education created this really great program that I took, and I learned so much about identity theft and how to protect yourself and your credit. And it's critical that we pay attention to these things. Now, as we talk about building wealth through real estate, not everybody has a big pile of money. Who has, a couple $100,000 sitting around to go start investing? I would say very few people, considering that the average American household is just a few paychecks away from homelessness. The likelihood of us being able to start in real estate investing is pretty slim. So we're going to have to be able to leverage ourselves in order to get ourselves going. So other people's money becomes something that becomes very prescient to us. And we can go and scurry around and look for investors, or we can find people and take programs like what you offer and do JVs where you can have somebody kind of groom you into the system, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and by putting a small amount of money down and buying the first property and using my system where you kind of live in the property and move your way up the investment chain, if you will. And in order to do that, you have to have good credit. But there are some people that need to know what you're doing with your credit, like your mortgage lender, which is one of your better partnerships that you need to make. But, so many people just get nosy, and I've been both in mortgages and real estate, and I'm currently a real estate broker here in Arizona. And I get some of these real estate agents that just drive me nuts because they want to know everything there is to know about their client. But that doesn't suit the client best because when you're in a transaction, duty of care. Right. So as soon as if I'm a real estate agent and I am sitting on both sides of the fence, I'm both your mortgage lender and your real estate professional, or you've divulged a ton of information to me as only your real estate professional and I'm not your mortgage lender. If I find out that you have a challenge with qualifying for your loan, let's say you lost your job, okay, as soon as I find that, I'm obligated to the transaction to disclose that information to the seller. Now, if I'm just your real estate professional and you're handling that with your mortgage person, and you got fired, okay, but, you wound up being able to find another job and you just had a hiccup and your mortgage lender worked with their underwriter and still cut your approval, okay. Now, me not knowing that means I don't have to jeopardize your real estate transaction. But my biggest concern is that folks are divulging too much information and too much confidential information. They're giving out copies of their credit reports to their realtors. That has nothing to do with a realtor or real estate professional negotiating your transaction. No. All they need to know is how much you want to pay for this property and when do you want to close.
Right. There was I'll call it an organization I wanted to join. And I held it a high standard, or at the moment prior to me wanting to join it. And they required this full credit background. And I thought to myself, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to give an organization who doesn't need it for any other reason except to qualify me to be inside the organization that information, because I don't know who's in charge of it. I don't know where it's going to go. And my wife, like your husband, she went through identity theft, and it was huge to get those things taken care of, and it would make be way too much harm. And so people that are just freely asking and then giving this information, they really need to be thinking twice before releasing it. And you're right, you don't need it in a real estate transaction. You should be able to prove proof of funds and a qualification system, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, identity theft is a scary proposition. You don't even think about the amount of money lost. What would you do if you went to jail for identity theft? Okay, the way we found out about my husband's identity theft thing is because the FBI descended upon our offices. And so they just, they whip out a badge, they start talking. My husband's opening up his file. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop, shut up, who are you? And the guy gives me his card, and he goes, you could just call the number on that card. And I'm like, I saw the movie Spanish Prisoner. I know how this works. I'm calling my friend in the FBI, and I'm going to find out what's going on. And somebody took his Social Security number, reported taxes, and did it with one of those companies that offers you a rapid refund, right, and then defaulted on it. Yep. And it was up to my husband to prove his innocence, even though this guy got arrested, went to prison, served his time. We still have this silly little $4,000 tax lien on my husband's credit that every time we go to apply for a loan, we have to disclose it. Right. And then we have to explain everything, and we have to fully document it, saying just the credit bureaus haven't taken it off. Yep. They won't remove the lien, even though it was proven that we don't owe it. Yep. And so if you're not savvy with all of that stuff or don't have the time, you'll find a whole lot of it if you wind up going to jail for somebody else's crime that they commit under your identity.
I have a good acquaintance who's a hard money lender, and someone actually stole a piece of property which he loaned on.
Wow.
So they found a piece of property that was free and clear and became that person who was on title and sold it to someone who borrowed money from a hard money lender. And of course, title and notaries and all that. You know, if you have the ID, you are the person. And then the borrower stopped paying, and here the hard money lender was faced with, wait a second, I didn't actually loan it to the real person. And it can be a real thing for everybody listening. So identity theft is something you absolutely want to monitor. And
it's very, very real, you know, and 15 years ago, you know, when I was seeing it happen as a mortgage lender, you know, it was 9 times out of 10, it was somebody that you knew or were related to. I mean, my mother used to go and use my brother and I's social security numbers to get credit cards. I mean, and we got put on check systems. And it's kind of like the credit rating for checking accounts. And we couldn't open up new bank accounts for 5 years because my mother bounced so many checks and then never paid the debt. You know, just walked away from the account. And my brother and I got stuck with that. And, you know, back then, you know, most of the time it was somebody that you knew that had access to your information. And the reason why it's so convenient when it's somebody you know is because are you going to send your own mother to jail? Because that's what they said. If I didn't file a police report and you know, implicate my mother, that I was still obligated to the debt on all of the credit cards. Same with my brother. We wound up having to pay off these credit cards, you know, because neither of us wanted to send our mother to jail.
Well, you're not.
You know, but now identity theft with the internet is anonymous. Yeah. It's so easy.
I was in Georgia the other day, sitting in my desk in Bakersfield, and I wasn't sure how that could happen, but it did twice. And so I called my credit card company. I said, "So wait a second, I'm obviously not there, and how does this happen? You know, how does this happen?" And they go, "Well," and it was so like casual of an answer. Well, what they do is they just make a credit card with their name on it, with their identification, with your credit card number. And I said, "Wait a second, they actually have machines that you can buy that you can make credit cards." See, I'm naive. I'm thinking only really important people have credit card making machines.
You'd be surprised.
It's a whole world out there that's different because of the internet. And I hate it as a business because I know ultimately it falls in the hands of the business who took the credit card, not knowing that there was fraud being taken place. But anyway, it's a crazy world.
Yeah, I mean, my first experience with it, you know, somebody misreported taxes under my taxpayer ID number. And at the time, I was a cheerleader in high school in Arizona. I didn't get paid for that, so I know I didn't have any W-2s to file. It was in Pennsylvania. It was a completely other state. And so they said, well, I said, you know, I said, this isn't me. I don't owe this. And they said, well, keep refiling, and we'll get it straight. And I was like, I can't refile if I never filed. And so I just blew it off because I was 18, right? Whatever. I blew it off. And when I was 22, they had seized all my assets. And I didn't know this at the time. And because I kept going to my bank, I always did, you know, ATM deposits after I got off of work. And that was back when you used to be able to deposit cash in an ATM and it wasn't a bad thing. And so I was, you know, I just kept putting more money in my account. And I didn't know that my account had been frozen until they came to my work to repo my vehicle for non-payment. I'm like, I keep mailing you checks. And they're like, yeah, they keep bouncing.
Well,
I'm like, oh.
I'm laughing because someone actually said that if they have checks, there must be money in their bank account. Anyway, what would you like to help their investment community with? If there was one or two things that you could help them with, what would you like to how would you like to help them the most?
I would like to help them get the right mindset when it comes to investing. And that's the biggest challenge, because how do we stay, as the Buddhists say, mindful and present moment, and keep one eyeball here and keep one eyeball on the future, on our forward thinking goals? Because, you know, we always say, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll get started tomorrow. And tomorrow never comes. You know, because when tomorrow does get here, it's today again.
Right.
And so if I could help folks with one thing, it would be to not only say in this moment what's going to make me happy, but ask a follow-up question is what I'm spending this money on, is it going to make me more money in the future, or is it the end of the road of this dollar? Because, I think of the goose that laid the golden egg. And if we eat the goose, we have no more golden eggs. But if we save up enough money to buy the goose, we can eat the eggs, and we can have unlimited eggs. But we have to have the foresight and the planning to save up for that first goose, and then be disciplined enough to only eat the eggs.
Yep, absolutely. It's tough though when we can't envision it. I always ask my coaching students, go out and lay in the bed of the big house that you want to buy, because there's probably a bed there and no one's laying in it. So go get in it and feel it and smell it and taste it. And when you set your goals, try to envision what that would feel like to have them or obtain them. But for a lot of folks, that it's hard for them to imagine, because there's all they can imagine is their day. And we set those tomorrow goals, but today is so tough. We're so tired of today that we can't even think about tomorrow, but we want to. So that's a hard thing. I knew for me, when my life changed dramatically, it's when I on purpose started paying myself. And I don't mean a paycheck, but I paid myself every day of my life. And to this day, I pay myself every day. And I'm not going to go into details how I do that, but I make it a priority to pay myself. And because I know at some point in life, I'll need those paychecks.
Right.
And they're not.
And you got to pay yourself first.
Yeah.
And when you can get that discipline to pay yourself first and then spend only what's left over, you'll always be successful. You'll always have a safety net.
Right. Yeah, no, because that's what it is. It's not a payment to pay bills with. It is a payment to yourself for you that you don't touch. It's yours. And it probably doesn't make sense for a lot of folks. But when they start paying themselves, whatever amount it is, whatever, could be a little amount, but if they just started, then they'd arrive. And some people do that with, cash flow property. Some people do that with the stock market. Some people do that with other things. I like to do it with cash, because I know at the end of the day, it's a valuable thing. It's a valuable resource. And
it's tangible. You can feel it. You can rub it up against your cheek and love it and be like, yes, this is mine. I earned this.
Yep.
And this is my payment for today. And that's a great place to start, is just with $1, because sometimes that's even a hurdle for folks.
No,
because they think, I got to do this for my family or for my kids or my sister or brother or my parents. And we get all caught up in this, I have to help everybody else. But if you're not helping you, who will?
Right. And if you're not helping you, how can you help someone else? And one of the common questions I'm asked is, what kind of a budget should I place for certain things? I don't care what kind of budget it is. If what you should do is start out by saying, can I prove that I can fulfill a budget? So if my budget is $1,000, I want to put that away, or I want to put that into a passive income, then I would suggest to someone, well, let's put it in a bank account for 3 months in a row. If you can do that, that means you can actually apply it to something else. But if you can't, maybe you can't. So I vividly remember when my son decided to buy a house, and I convinced him to, prior to him buying it, prove to himself he can afford it by making a mortgage payment he didn't have to make to himself prior to him owning that house, which seems kind of ridiculous if you think about it, but I wanted him to understand what it would feel like to have the responsibility of home ownership.
I think it's brilliant. I think it was a brilliant idea.
Prior to home ownership. So, and then when he was able to step into home ownership, he had this big old fat, pile of cash as well. So, it served for two purposes. Because I think
that's a great lesson.
We get so excited about, doing something new or taking the challenge. Well, let's make sure we can actually fulfill the challenge. So, but here he is with his home. What have I not asked you to share that you would like to share?
Well, let me think about that, because we've covered quite a bit of ground here in a short period of time. I think that one of my favorite sayings is knowledge is superfluous without application. And we get hung up in making mistakes, and we get kind of paralyzed with fear. And so we can sometimes get into an educational route where we keep becoming seminar junkies, and we take every seminar there is out there and we learn all these things, but our fear holds us back from taking that first plunge. And I liken back to my friend Max Newton, who's a motivational speaker and just the most amazing human being. And when I used to sit in on his radio shows as a protege, he would always say, ready, which is your educational piece, fire, take some action, and then aim and correct yourself. Because if you never take a shot, you don't know how on target you are. And so you got to take a shot and then adjust if you're not 100% in the bullseye. And that's the thing that I would like to communicate.
Even billionaires adjust. That's what's crazy. Mm-hmm. In fact, the more money you make, the more adjustment you will make. I mean, it's like
right.
Nothing stays constant except change.
Exactly. But the key is you have to take action. If you never take that step, if you fix to get ready, to think about, setting up, planning, to start, you're never going to get there. You just have to start. Yep. And then you can adjust accordingly, because when you get to that next step, you're a step closer to where you want to go, or you realize you've wandered in the wrong direction. But until you take that step, you don't know where you are to measure. And measurement's the key.
Absolutely. And I bought my first house or piece of property when I was, a teenager, an adult teenager, and I had no clue what I was doing. I wrote a bad check to buy the house. That's how much I knew about real estate back then. And I didn't have a coach. I've never had a coach inside of a real estate platform. I've had coaches for life coaches, but not someone that taught me how to buy and sell houses for profit. However, I have paid for so many invisible coaches, it's not even funny, with the money that I spent on mistakes. And I think that's a key component that a lot of folks really need to look at and ask themselves, should I have a coach? Should I have someone that guides me down this path? Or am I the kind of person that can guide themselves? And even if you are the second one, you're going to spend more money than you would spend finding and hiring the right coach, because man, a great coach or someone that will give you great advice can keep you from the second kick of the mule. Because our business and our industry is so specific that sometimes we don't know we're making mistakes until it's way too late.
Right. And you bring up a good point, because you're going to spend the money anyway. Would you rather spend it fixing a mistake or investing a fraction of that with a coach to tell you, avoid that left turn, and now you spent the same amount of money, but you have a lot more working towards your benefit as opposed to fixing a mistake? So it's up to the individual, pay me now, pay me later. You're going to spend the money, so it makes sense to invest up front in somebody who's been there, done that, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, and the perfect examples, and society is so accustomed to accepting an athlete and having a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach his entire life, but he was the best player. So if the best player needs a coach, so does the worst player. I think everybody needs coaches, at least accountability partners, someone that's going to hold them accountable. If it's not a coach, find someone that's going to hold them accountable to what they want to do in life. It would be better if the person holding them accountable knew how to force them to fall forward correctly. But at the very least, have someone that's going to hold you accountable.
Yes, that's a critical piece. That's a great piece of advice.
So do you help folks?
I do help folks. I deal mostly in my coaching practice. Now, I have my Unlock Your Wealth radio show, where I teach my brain-based financial literacy program each and every week through Unlock Your Wealth Radio, where I interview folks. And then I also have Keys to Riches, which is the financial philosophy of it. And I do a coaching program, but it's a little unique. I focus on a problem called sudden wealth syndrome. And I don't know if you have heard of sudden wealth syndrome, but when I explain it to you, you'll be like, oh, I get that. So in the most extreme cases, you see sudden wealth syndrome show up in people who win the lottery, people who become overnight sensations, in professional athleticism, music, entertainment, the arts. When folks come into a large sum of money, inheritance can do this too. When you inherit a whole bunch of money and it pushes you out of your financial comfort zone. People make ineffective decisions with sudden wealth syndrome. And so I deal with a lot of folks, and my coaching practice is, musicians, entertainers, professional athletes who have come into a bunch of money with all of their old financial programming from being a child. And most of them were impoverished or grew up in very, very strict or stressful households. They had challenging upbringings. Most of the people that achieved extreme success usually had some form of extreme punishment in one way or another, and they use whatever their sport or craft is to overcome that, to escape it. But the money represents other things to them than what it should, and so they have challenges with it. That's why you see most lottery winners are broke or dead within a couple years of inheriting large sums of money. You see professional athletes and entertainers filing bankruptcy all the time because they just can't get out of their own way when it comes to money management. They, like I did when I was young, made assumptions about what rich people did or how rich people behaved or what the expectation was. And so they try to live up to that, or they deal with extreme guilt for their success. So that's kind of what I help people with. And you can have sudden wealth syndrome just with a tax refund. How many people do you know throughout your lifetime that have actually invested an entire tax return? Most folks blow them.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that they do that, and when they didn't, one, maybe even know they were getting it back or receiving it back, and two, didn't need it. It's like, this is like extra money, people. Let's go make money with your money. Let's not spend it. Mm-hmm. Now, I do like, I drive a Bentley, so I do like my toys, but I also like being responsible to my life first, and the toys are second. So,
right, and you wouldn't have those unless you knew that you could afford them. And that's the challenge that credit cards and financing gives us, is it allows us to party like rock stars, even though we don't have that type of income. And that's where we create problems for ourselves.
Absolutely. And, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, as folks, that you can find me on the web. My radio show is syndicated across America, but it's also available on iTunes and Libsyn, as well as unlockyourwealthradio.com. And if you're interested in identity theft, tips, fraud, and scam alerts, you can visit our website at moneycreditandyou.com.
Very good. And we'll put all of your links on our site as well for people to follow you. This has been wonderful. I don't want these interviews to be dry, and I hope they haven't been so far. Yeah, because I learned so much from folks like yourself.
Likewise.
Anytime I can learn something, I think I've had a blessed day. And so thank you very much. And we will talk soon, okay?
All right. Make it a great day.
Well, that was fun. That was a blast. And I thought I'd do what I did, and that was being all over the place, being all over the board, asking all kinds of silly questions. But you know what? That's just that's who I am. If someone takes me in a direction and I think it's fascinating, I'm going to ask some questions. I hope it made sense to you guys. And I appreciate you listening in. And until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.